It's a great story. We started Reading Recovery in part because I work for Gulf Coast Community Foundation. One of our wonderful donors is Keith Monda, the former president and COO of Coach, also very active with the Ohio State University. And he and his wife Linda had invested in Reading Recovery 9 years ago when there was a federal challenge grant that required some private philanthropy. So when Keith and I met, he used to slip me these funny little pieces of paper that said, words like discontinued, and he'd say, this is a really great program. You really need to think about implementing it in Sarasota. How could we do that? Finally, one day I thought, he said it enough times. We are looking, as a community foundation, we always want to make an impact. So I spoke to our head of elementary schools at the time, Dr. Laura Kingsley, and said, do you know about this program called Reading Recovery? And she said, oh, Reading Recovery. And I said, well, what if we could bring it to our school system? And so the rest is history. We sort of call it, we mapped out a plan on the back of a napkin over lunch, Keith, myself, Laura Kingsley, and then it just so happened when I called up to OSU, Dr. McGee has a home, Dr. Leah McGee has a home in Sarasota, and she is a reading recovery expert. So we invited her to come down and have lunch with us, and literally mapped out a budget and a plan for implementing reading recovery. We're a large community foundation, about 300 million, and our mission is, together with our donors, we transform our region through bold and proactive philanthropy. So one of our board members had just mentioned in passing that, and really not in passing, but as we think about what we were going to do next, she wanted something that would close the achievement gap. And we were looking for something that could really help us close the achievement gap in Sarasota County. And we really feel like we found it in Reading Recovery, thanks to Keith. And the implementation was sort of, we didn't know where we were going with it. But one of the things that you can do with philanthropy is you can take chances. And so putting that initial investment in and then bringing more people to the table, you look at the numbers and it proves out that we were right.
Our philanthropy, one of the critical elements in our philanthropy are children. My wife and I are very active in a number of children's causes. Obviously, children hunger is one of them. And we were involved with the early adoption by the Ohio State University with a large grant. And so I started to read about the success of this program and was convinced that it was an excellent program that should be implemented. I met Veronica and I kept nagging her about the importance of thinking about this, because the data was overwhelming. I would say, hey, there are 2 million kids that completed this, and 70 to 75% read it great. That's astounding. And finally, she capitulated, and the rest is pretty much history. Our objective, I think, remains the same: to make sure that these young children know how to read. But what it is we want to make sure that every child gets a chance. And that chance requires him or her to know how to read. And this is my sawhorse, so to speak. I'm always talking about confidence. People ask me, what are the ingredients of success? And clearly, one of the ingredients of success, and no matter what anyone decides to do, you have to have confidence. You have to believe in yourself. And these young kids that come in that don't know how to read, they know they don't know how to read. They know their buddies know how to read. They need something, a skill set, number one, but to change their attitude about themselves.
We have people occasionally, and I know certainly other districts with Reading Recovery experience this, where people wonder about the cost of reading recovery. And, as Terry Hansen, a good friend of ours, likes to say, what's the cost of having a child be illiterate? I mean, if we look down the road in the state of Florida, I think one of the metrics for figuring out, what you're going to build in terms of prison space is how many kids aren't reading it at grade level by, you know, 3rd or 4th grade. That's not good. And so the cost is actually, I think, still relatively small.
You asked the cost issue question.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the one thing that I think is even more immediate is if you look, all you have to do is look at the cost of retention.
Yes.
And the cost of having this program is less than the cost of retention. So you don't even have to go out and talk about, I mean, it's great to talk about the future, but you can,
You're right.
There's like an immediacy, you know that there's an immediate benefit because those children are no longer held back.
And Laura,
Not
talk
just
about
that.
what we learned both in our first year and now our second year about retention.
Yes, so the trajectory goes down in the number of kids retained in not only first grade, but kindergarten also, because principals and school teams realize that with children who are struggling in kindergarten and potentially would have been retained previously, they say, hey, but there's hope because they can be possibly in first round reading recovery in first grade. So yes, dramatic drop.
Again, thinking about confidence, I mean, can you imagine the devastating impact on your confidence if you're in the kindergarten and you're asked to stay back? I mean,
Yes.
now clearly, if there are other issues, that's one thing, but you know, this is solvable. The other thing that I find interesting, and Laura can talk a little bit about this, is the dialogue that now takes place, where we have Title I. For instance, in a Title I school, we have we have 2 reading recovery teachers. But what happens outside of
Right.
that? Talk a little bit about the impact on other teachers of now.
The first graders,
Right.
So, you know, the professional development that goes into this training of these literacy experts, which is what we call them, reading recovery teacher / literacy expert, is the best professional development that personally I've ever seen. And I've been in education for over 30 years. You know, Keith, you're always saying that reading recovery builds this confidence in the children. It does the same thing for the teachers. And then for them to be able to go back and in their peer group share professional development that they have learned is really critical. So what started as a twinkle in his eye and the motivation from Veronica to try to assist in making that twinkle a reality ended up happening.
having reading recovery in all 23 of Sarasota County's elementary schools, with at least two teachers in each Title I school, 1 in every non-title school. And it's been just a tremendous impact. One of the things that we really believe in, the 3 of us, one of our major investors, the Charles and Marjorie Bransick Foundation, is about capacity building in teachers. And so we know that every teacher who goes through the reading recovery training, we've now not only changed the lives of the children they're working with now, but as long as they're a teacher, we've now changed all of those children's lives, whether they stay as a reading recovery teacher or whether they move on to something else at some other point in their career.
And we're going to end up keeping my #1 objective, which is making sure that every child gets a chance. That's all I want. Every child gets a chance. And this is going to make the difference.